Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Sahar. I'm an incoming 1L at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and I would love to have you as a subscriber. I will also link my social media down below if you would like to follow me elsewhere. Today's video is going to be all about my application stats. So we're going to be talking about my LSAT, my GPA, my resume, all of the work experiences, leadership experience, and just everything that kind of made up my application and that got me into law school. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I'm not an admissions counselor or I don't work in the admissions committee or anything like that. This is just all of my personal experience and kind of my opinions and also just what I scored on certain tests. So take everything I say in this video with a grain of salt, although the admissions process is pretty numbers heavy and it is a numbers game. It is not everything, and if you have a lower LSAT or a lower GPA, it's not the end of the world. Like, you can still apply to great schools, you can still get into great schools. There's a lot that makes up your application process, and majority of schools do look at it from a holistic point of view. So shoot your shot, and without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into this video. So let's talk about the big one. You know, the one everyone wants to know is the LSAT. Now, I have generalized anxiety disorder, but more specifically, I have really bad test anxiety. Like, it's really bad. And so I have never been good at standardized tests like the ACT, the SAT, not my jam. And unfortunately, that was also the case with the LSAT. And I studied for an entire year. So from April of 2020 until April of 2021, I studied. And it was crazy. It was a crazy year. But even with my test anxiety, I'm still pretty proud and pleased with my LSAT score. Do I wish it was higher? Yes, of course. Who doesn't, unless you scored a 180? But that's besides the point. I'm just glad to never have to think about this test again or take this test again. So anyways, I ended up scoring a 164, and that is the number that I sent to schools. Now, moving on to my GPA. So LSAC is really weird, and they do this like recalculation of your GPA. So once you upload your transcript, you will probably see a change in your GPA. For most people, really slight, like 0.01. Like, it's not that dramatic. For me, for some reason, it was very dramatic, and it was dramatic in a very positive sense. So I was pretty pleased with my LSAC recalculated GPA. And I think the reason is because I obviously had my undergraduate GPA, like where I got my degree from, but I also took a few community college classes at 3 different community colleges. And so you have to send your transcript from all of them, and they take those grades into account. They weigh a lot less, I think. Again, don't quote me on this, but they do count. And so I think because I had like a 4.0 in all of my community college classes, it did bump up my overall GPA. So I ended up applying with a 3.79, which I was really happy with. It wasn't like insanely higher than my undergraduate GPA at the time. I think I had like a 3.73 or something like that, but it did bump me up quite a bit. So I was pretty happy with that change. So yeah, I had a 3.79 when I applied. Okay, let's talk about my work experience. Let's talk about what's on my resume. So honestly, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to straight up pull up my resume on my laptop because I just recently redid it because I'm applying for a scholarship because fancy, and I had to submit a resume for it. And so I like revamped up my resume, added the University of Illinois Juris Doctor on my resume that I would get it in May of 2025. That was really satisfying. But we've got an updated resume, folks. So I'm just gonna go through and talk about basically everything on here and what I submitted, because I didn't really change a lot of like the work experience and everything on here. It's just a matter of like formatting and adding my new school and everything like that. So this is all that I put when I applied to law school. So we're gonna just go in chronological order. So the very first like oldest thing that I have on here is I worked as a marketing / PR intern for a nonprofit in New York. So I have that, and I did that my summer after my sophomore year. Yes, my summer after my sophomore year. And then I was also a TA for a class, and it was a really interesting and like unique class because it wasn't just me like grading papers. I actually led the class discussions. Like there was one professor who was in charge of all of the sections, and the TAs all got their own section. So I would teach class every single week, and it was more of like helping freshmen kind of transition and understand the college and give them like assignments to help them transition and stuff like that. So it was a pretty chill class. Like I wasn't up here teaching OChem or anything, but I thought that was interesting, and so I did put that on my resume that I led those classroom discussions and everything like that. So that was a cool thing on my resume. And then I was a marketing assistant for an entire year for the MPA program office, which is the Masters of Professional Accounting in my business school. So I did graduate with an accounting degree, but I was a marketing major at the time of this position. So that's why a lot of these are like marketing stuff. But yeah, so I did that. I was a marketing assistant part-time for a full year. And then I think like the biggest work experience thing I have is I was an intern, and then I transitioned into a full-time job as a staff accountant for a company in Austin, Texas. So that's what I was doing up until like a month ago. Is I graduated in December, and up until like April, May-ish of this year, I was working full-time as a staff accountant. So got a lot of work experience on there. And even though I applied to law school at the time without like the full-time position, I still had the fact that I did an internship with that company from that summer until my last fall semester last fall. And then I also put that I did receive a full-time offer, so I was going to be working with them. So they knew that I would have some full-time job experience going into law school. So I don't know if that like changed anything for them, but I thought I would throw that out there, that I did work full-time like out of graduation, and I'm not just like going straight into law school. And then the last thing that I have on here is a YouTube thing, which is really cool. So I doubt anyone knows this because I don't talk about it, but I do link it in every single video. But I do have a second YouTube channel. Well, I guess this is my second YouTube channel. That's my first one. And I've had it for 2 years now, and I have over 3,000 subscribers on there, and I make money off of there, which is really cool. But it is a booktube channel. If you don't know what booktube is, it's just book YouTube, like we talk about books. It's a great community. I love it. I will link that again, as I do in every video, down below if you want to check that out. But that is something that I put on my resume because, one, I'm really proud of the fact that I can make money off of YouTube videos. That is really cool to me, but also because it is something that I'm really passionate about, and I wanted to show that on my resume, and I really like talking about it. So yeah. And that is all of my work experience. And then for leadership experience that I put, I have 2 different clubs with 3 different like leadership positions in them. So the first one that I have listed is Lions Club International at UT, so University of Texas at Austin, which is where I got my undergrad degree. And for this, I did hold a position my freshman year as just like a chair in a committee, but I felt like that wasn't really necessary because then I like led the committee the next year, and I basically did the same thing, except I was just like delegating those tasks. So I just kind of combined those 2 leadership positions into one little like section. So I put that I was a leader for that for a year. And then I have Texas Bluebonnets, which is like a spirit group. It's kind of like a smaller version of a sorority, but in my humble opinion, I think it's a lot better. But yeah, so I did that. And so I was a judicial board member for a year and a half, and that basically meant that I was reading the bylaws, the Constitution, all of that for our committee or for our club, and discussing it with the committee and making changes and all of that. I thought that was pretty like legal related, so I put that one on there. And then I was co-recruitment director for an entire year, so obviously I led like the recruitment season and everything like that, so I put that for a year as well. So that is all that is on my resume. One thing that I did add that I think was a little fun, a little different, is I put like my interests at the very bottom. I highly recommend doing that, not just for law school applications, but because if anyone sees your resume and they have something in common with you in your interests, they're probably going to want to talk about it in an interview. They're more likely to call you to an interview. Like when people see other people that are similar to them, they're just more likely naturally to like them, you know? So I put reading, cooking, working out, and traveling on there. So I don't think this helped at all in my admissions, to be honest, but I do think it is a great thing to add. I also put any like computer skills that I had. That's more for like jobs, like technical jobs, but it's cool for them to know that I'm well versed in MS Office and iMovie and Canva. So that is all that was on my resume. What I want to talk about is kind of like essays, because I think that those are still really, really important. Like, I think I got waitlisted from some really incredible schools, and I was way below their LSAT median and their GPA medians, like nowhere near the ballpark, and I still like got waitlisted, which I know isn't like an admission, but it's still pretty great, I think. Like, I don't know. And I think it's because of my essays. I am really, really proud of my personal statement. I talked about a very personal matter. I want to go into medical malpractice and injury law and all of that kind of like health stuff. And so I talked about a personal experience with a, not like a medical malpractice lawsuit or anything, but like kind of in that general realm that led to it. And it was a very, I was very vulnerable in it, and I talked a lot about my family and a lot of emotional stuff, and it was a really sad essay, but I think it was very honest and true to what I was trying to get across, and I think the admissions committee saw that. I also wrote every single optional essay that they had. I obviously wrote all of the required essays that every school had, and overall, if there was something that said optional that I could fill out, I filled it out. Like, obviously I wasn't gonna fill out like, do you have a criminal record? Because like, I don't, you know, like I'm not gonna like explain something that I don't have, but for all of the optional stuff, I did fill those out. And then the last thing that I'm gonna talk about is the letters of recommendation. So honestly, I don't think that these really helped that much, to be honest. Like, no shame to like my recommenders or anything, but I definitely did not get to know my professors really well for like the 3.5 years that I was in undergrad, because I went to a giant school, like a giant public school, and so it was really hard to connect with my professors. Like, I had classes that were like hundreds of people, like hundreds, and then I also had like only a handful of classes that were maybe like under 50, you know. So it was really hard to connect with my professors, and so I did end up asking one professor. I feel like she still didn't like know me really well, but did know and could tell like more personal stories of me as a student, so I thought that would really help. I also asked my employer from my sophomore year internship, the like nonprofit place that I did. She was the CEO of the company, so I asked her for a letter. I mean, I'm sure she wrote like the normal like great things that you would write when you're recommending someone, but again, like I don't think she knew me very well like personally. So yes, like recommendation letters do matter, I think, because if they can tell personal stories more about you as just a student or a worker, that is wonderful. That's all you really need. Like, I don't need someone to share like who I am as a person. Like, I just really wanted them to showcase how I'm really hardworking and how I kind of interact with others and those kinds of things that I think are going to be more important in law school and in the school setting, as well as like in the legal industry in general. So I think it did its job, but I don't think they were like anything out of the ordinary in terms of rec letters. So do with that information as you will, but there you have it. Those are all of my application stats and just my entire law school application. Let me know if you want to know anything else about my application or anything like that, or if you have any questions. I would love to chat with you in the comments. But with that, I hope you're having a wonderful morning or night wherever you are, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.